Jane, and I'm talking to you today about Chapter 5, the digestive system. This is for HSC 114, Medical Terminology with Northeast Iowa Community College. And we are on infamous Chapter 5. We're now getting into anatomy and physiology a bit with our medical terminology. This is a very big chapter. It actually runs into Chapter 6 as well. I'm going to be flying through these slides, so if you need to pause on them to get the information down, feel free to do that. Really, all of this information should be in your textbook, so it's really just a repeat along with some highlights. So this gives you our chapter goals, what they are. They're essentially the same as Unit 2 in the syllabus because we're focusing on the gastrointestinal system. So what are the system's four main functions? The digestive or gastrointestinal system has four main functions. They're ingestion, digestion, absorption, and elimination. Ingestion is where you take food into your mouth. Digestion is where it's broken down, starting in your mouth, mechanically and chemically, and then it travels through the entire GI tract. And you'll want to make note of how proteins are broken down into amino acids, sugars break down into glucose, fats break down into fatty acids or triglycerides. The food then passes into the bloodstream through the lining cells of the small intestine. Please note that the small intestine is where your digested food is going to pass into the bloodstream. So be aware of that. Nutrients then travel to all the cells of the body, and the cells burn those nutrients, releasing energy. Elimination, that's where the waste materials that cannot be absorbed into the bloodstream have to be eliminated from the body somehow. The large intestine is the place that gathers all this waste material together and gets ready to excrete it out of the body. So it begins with the oral cavity. The major parts of the oral cavity are here: cheeks, lips, hard palate, soft palate, the rugae, uvula, tongue, papillae, tonsils, gums, teeth, and pharynx. This gives you a great view of what all those parts are, as well as their combining forms. Notice that there's only one with an I on it, denti, number 9. The rest have O as their combining vowel. Make sure that you're aware of what all of these mean and where they are. Also make note of the fact that number 6 is your tongue, and there are 2 that could go with that. Same thing with number 2 for the lips, and number 9 for the teeth. There's 2 possibles there. This goes into what's in a tooth: crown, root, enamel, dentin, pulp, gingiva, cementum, root canal, which I hope you don't have to have. Those aren't very fun. Periodontal membrane. And again, this shows you where those all are. So what is swallowing? Deglutition. Deglutition is swallowing. And this gives you a view. On the left side of your screen, it shows you the bolus of food, which is that green item, and how it's right at your throat. It's where the epiglottis is closed because now it's going to swallow. Then you're going to see on the right-hand side where the bolus has moved past the epiglottis. It's now open so that the trachea can breathe, because you don't want to try and breathe and swallow at the same time. Not a good idea. Great way to choke, unfortunately. So this gives you a really good view of that. Parts of the stomach. Starts with the lower esophageal sphincter. Lower esophageal sphincter. Goes through the fundus, greater curvature into the lesser curvature. Those rugae, body, antrum, pylorus, and pyloric sphincter. Sphincter is, just think of that PH there at the beginning as an F. And that may help you when you're talking. But when you're spelling, make sure you turn that F into a PH, because when you spell it, it's got to have that PH. And when you speak it, it needs to have an F, like in fish. This is a good view of the parts of the stomach. It gives you a chance to see all of those. And then this talks about the digestive tract. This is slide 1 of 2. There's all these pieces and parts. It starts with the esophagus. Goes to the stomach, duodenum, which is a part of the small intestine. Then you have liver, gallbladder, and pancreas. Then you pick back up with the small intestine for the jejunum and ileum. You start with the large intestine with the cecum, appendix, ascending colon, transverse colon, descending colon, sigmoid colon, rectum, and anus. With the colon, think about drawing a box. Ascending as you go up, transverse as you go across, descending as you come down. But instead of putting a straight bottom on your box, you're going to make an S for that sigmoid. And if you can keep that in mind, you start on the left with ascending, transverse is across the middle, descending is down the right, but at the bottom, instead of putting a flat bottom on your box, do an S, and that's your sigmoid colon. And hopefully that mental picture will help you remember it. And here is an anatomical drawing, and it has all those pieces and parts. Now remember, the liver, the spleen, and the pancreas, they are part of the digestive tract, but they're not a part of the intestines. Even though it was mentioned, those are all involved with the small intestine, and as we go forward, you'll see how that involvement works out. So you see here the villi. Those are in the lining of the small intestine, and you look at the cross section, you can see the lymph vessels and blood vessels, and you can see that that's how those nutrients get passed into the bloodstream. Now, when we go into the large intestine, we talked about all those different parts, talked about how to remember those 4 parts of the colon. Remember, draw your box, left, across, you go left, up, across to the right, down the right, and then instead of the bottom of the box being straight, you do an S for a sigmoid. And that's where you get your pieces and parts. And here's a picture of that. You can sort of see that box. See how it goes? You start with your appendix down there and the cecum, and then it goes right up into that ascending colon. Then it goes across, which is that transverse colon. Then it comes down that right side, which is your descending colon. And then you've got that S, the sigmoid colon, before it goes into the rectum and the anus. So liver, gallbladder, pancreas, why do we talk about those? And what is a common bile duct? What is the pancreatic duct? And then why do we talk about the duodenum, which is part of the large intestine, I believe. So here's your answer. The liver has several involvements in this, and you'll see in the next slide, I think it is. But here's how they're all hooked together. You've got the hepatic duct, the common bile duct that you can see there. Here you go, liver. It also, besides producing bile, and we can talk about bile if you really, really want to, but it helps maintain normal blood glucose levels, helps you manufacture those blood proteins that you need for clotting. It releases bilirubin, which is a pigment in the bile. Have you ever heard of hyperbilirubinemia? That is something that often newborns get, and we call it jaundice. And what it is they have too much of it. The liver removes toxins and poisons from the blood, and you really can't live without your liver and pancreas. That's why oftentimes you'll hear that people who are diagnosed with liver or pancreatic cancer, it's sort of a death sentence, because unless you can get a transplant, which is very rare, those 2 parts of your body are just indispensable. You can lose your gallbladder. They can take that out and you'll do just fine. You won't miss that at all. But when it comes to the liver and pancreas, those are absolutely critical. So here, what happens if it can't leave the body and remains in the bloodstream? I gave you that hint on the slide before. All right, pancreas. It secretes insulin. That's the endocrine function. And the insulin goes into the bloodstream to the cells. It also excretes enzymes, and those go into the duodenum for digestion. Enzymes break things down, and insulin is what turns that glucose into energy or stores it, those types of activities. So pancreas is really, really critical. You need both of those. So we know that the pathway is that it enters through your oral cavity, exits through the anus. And here's a really good visual about how that happens and how the liver, gallbladder, and pancreas play a role in breaking the food down so that we can take advantage of all the nutrients in our body through the small intestine and get rid of the waste through our large intestine. And there you have it. All right, what's the first term? Part of the large intestine. You can do this. You can do this. Think about it. The duodenum and jejunum are part of the small intestines. You know it's not those. And the pylorus belongs to what part? The stomach. So what does that leave you? Hint, hint, hint. All right, which term means swallowing? We talked about this. Mastication. What is mastication? You'll often see cows doing a lot of mastication. Goats do it too. It's called chewing. Emulsification. Think about what that means. An emulsifier or emulsifying something. It's not the same. Peristalsis. Peristalsis. Does that sound like you're swallowing something? No, no. Remember on that first slide, deglutition. Deglutition. That's swallowing. So here are our vocabulary words. And like I said, I'm trying to keep these videos to 15 minutes or less. I'm going to fly through here. And again, this all should be in your textbook. And if you're not familiar with any of these words, as well as their meaning, make sure you do flashcards on these or have somebody, someone quiz you on them. And this gives you some more. Hey, cecum. That's the answer to one of those questions before. First part of the large intestine is the cecum. And again, deglutition, that's swallowing. Duodenum is your first part of your small intestine. Can you believe it's 12 inches long? A foot long. This gives you some more. Enzyme, this is a really good one. Enzyme names end in ASE, A's. So it's a chemical that speeds up reactions between substances. Usually it breaks them down as well. But enzyme names end in the suffix ASE. So make sure you make a note of that because that will help you as we go along, especially when you get into chapter 18, which is the endocrine system. All right, so what else? Glycogen. Hydrochloric acid. Did you know that you have hydrochloric acid and you definitely need it? It's in your stomach. If you get a chance, study about insulin. We'll definitely come back to that when we study about diabetes in chapter 18 with the endocrine system. Another enzyme there, lipase, ASE, lipase. Mastication. Remember the cows and the goats, they chew. Mastication. And hopefully we do too, because it's not a good idea to swallow if we don't do. All right, let's see here. Papillae is the plural, papilla is the singular. You have those on your tongue. Peristalsis, that's the rhythmic contractions of tubular organs, like your esophagus. When you're swallowing food, peristalsis happens, those rhythmic contractions. Protease, ends in ASE, so what is it? It's an enzyme. Then you have your pyloric sphincter. It's that ring of muscle. And when you've got peristalsis happening and it gets near that pyloric sphincter, that's when it opens up and moves the food, the bolus of food from your esophagus into your stomach. And remember that rouge, you have those ridges, they're on both your hard palate and the wall of your stomach. So it's not just located, it's not just limited to one place. Oh, really quick, under saliva, notice there's another enzyme mentioned there, amylase. Amylase. And you have salivary glands, you have parotid, you have sublingual and submandibular. Sublingual, where are those located? Lingual, under your tongue. Submandibular, we haven't talked much about your jaw yet, but you have a mandible, and that's your jaw. So underneath your jaw and underneath your tongue. Now, parotid, you have parotid glands, and those are located in front of your ears, in front of almost somewhat underneath your ears. And those are also salivary glands. We'll talk more about triglycerides when we get to the cardiology chapter, but it's a good idea for you to know what they are. Villus is a singular projection. Villi is plural. And you can thank the Romans for that. That's Latin. Villus is singular, villi is plural. Okay, so we get to combining forms here. You've got your root word and you've got your combining vowel. Together, that's your combining form, and this will tell you what it means. And the ones that I'd like to point out to you really quickly are the ones that have more than one there or that have a combining vowel of anything other than O. So just be looking for those as you go through here. Also be aware too that some of these have more than some of these meanings like tongue or lip have more than one combining form, because remember, linguo is also tongue. So if you're looking on this slide, you'll see that there are two that have the meaning of tongue. And if you go back a couple of slides, you'll see a second one for lip. And remember, tooth could have been denti or odonto. So as you're memorizing, just keep that in mind. Okay, here's some more. And these are substances. So these get into your sugars, your starches, all the different things that happen. And then we've got some suffixes here to be aware of. Remember ASE for enzyme. And remember IASIS, IASIS, that's abnormal condition. So you're going to make sure that you're paying attention to that. You'll hear preprandial and postprandial. Pre is before, post is after. Make sure you remember those two prefixes. Pre is before, post is after. And prandial is a suffix that means meal. So if you see preprandial, there's no combining form there. There's no root and combining vowel. It's just a prefix and a suffix together. And if you remember from what we learned in week 1, not every medical term has a prefix, but every medical term has a suffix. So just keep that in mind. This is one of those very strange ones. All right, anastomoses. You need to know these because you'll hear about them oftentimes with digestive procedures, that they make an anastomosis or anastomoses. And you need to understand whether it's end-to-end, end-side, or side-to-side. So here's a quick quiz. Which term means inflammation of the lip? Think of the lip. And then think of the suffix that means inflammation. Okay, 5-2, pathology of the digestive system. We're at 19 minutes, so clearly my goal of keeping it to 15 isn't going to happen, but I'm going to try and keep going as quickly as I can. These gives you signs and symptoms, so make sure that you're aware of those. And jaundice, I was talking about that, where you have high levels of hyperbilirubinemia. That's what it is, hyperbilirubinemia. You often hear of people who have melena with colon cancer. That's one of the signs that something is really not well with someone's colon when they have melena. And let's see here. This is more about the oral cavity and teeth. Achalasia. That's when it will not relax and the lower esophageal sphincter will not relax. And so it feels like your food gets caught and it doesn't go from your esophagus into your stomach. This gives you some ideas about some unfortunate cancers that happen with the GI system. You may hear about esophageal varices. Usually this is most common with people who drink alcohol to an excess and have for a long time. They develop these varices and oftentimes they will bleed and that will cause them to throw up blood. You've often heard of GERD, gastroesophageal reflux disease. And there's a number of reasons for that and a number of treatments. I'll let you explore those on your own. You may have heard of hernias. People can have an inguinal hernia, they can have a groin hernia, they can have an umbilical hernia, they can have a hiatal hernia. A hernia is really just where the muscle is normally keeping the parts where they belong, and the hernia somehow gets outside of that muscle, and it can get tangled up, it can get cut off. It causes some major problems. You may have heard of people who have polyps in their colon, and that's where there are these growths that come out from the mucous membrane of the colon. Some are cancerous, some are not. Ooh, lovely picture there of some cancer. Moving right along, you may have heard of Crohn's disease or diverticulosis or diverticulitis. Those are different things that happen with your GI tract, and you're welcome to look those up to get more information. Some more things. Okay, here's about the liver, gallbladder, and pancreas. Cirrhosis is an interesting one. Sometimes cirrhosis happens with alcoholism, and sometimes it happens just for other reasons. It has nothing to do with alcohol. People who don't drink alcohol can get cirrhosis. So make sure that if you're studying cirrhosis or you're interacting with someone who has it, don't automatically assume that they had cirrhosis occur because of alcoholism, because that's not the only way you can get that. So just a FYI there. That's sort of a social stigma, is that if somebody says I've got cirrhosis of my liver, people think, oh my goodness, they've been drinking lots of alcohol for a very long time, and that's not necessarily correct. We talked a little bit about pancreatic cancer. Okay, ooh, look at those lovely gallstones in the gallbladder. All right, that's it. That's all I've got for this one. I'll be back shortly with chapter 6. See you soon.